So it's 7 o'clock. I really like to honor and respect everyone's time because, you know, it's pretty precious for all of us. Certainly if people come in, we'll admit them. But I want to welcome you all here tonight to our really very, I think, important presentation by Adam Novak from Jerusalem Memorial Chapel. You know, I think that all of us have been through one heck of a year, and some of you more so than others. All of us who've had a loss, I did too during the year. It really does have an impact on you. And so I'm so grateful that Adam really came to us and said, I really want to impart this information to people. Anyone who's ever dealt with FEMA knows that it can be, I'm going to try to say it nicely, it can be a challenge to try to, you know, do their applications properly, et cetera. So just want to say Adam is one of our sponsors and Friedberg Friends. So we are very grateful to you, Adam, for all you do for us. And just letting you all know that we have lots of programs at the JCC. I'm the director of social work at the JCC. We are always trying to provide information for the community and for our shared communities. And so I welcome you all here today. And I'm going to pass the huge gauntlet over to my friend Adam.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I know this is not a happy topic, but I think it's one that's important and one that I think I can help with and give some valuable information. Thank you, Gloria and Stacy and everybody else at the Friedberg JCC. We are a sponsor, but we're also a community member, and we realize and appreciate the value that the JCC brings to the entire community. Being a South Shore boy myself, growing up in Long Beach, I know Oceanside well, I know the area well, and I know how important and how vital the JCC is. And I say this on every Zoom I'm on. I think Gloria's hearing it, that the Friedberg JCC really took the lead with virtual programming once the quarantine happened a year ago or over a year ago, and now they continue to lead the way. Not only am I involved in the Friedberg JCC, but I'm involved with the Mid-Island Y JCC in Plainview, and I can tell you that the Friedberg JCC really led the way.
Put the top on.
So, for those who don't know me, my name is Adam Novak. I'm a co-founder and managing partner of Jerusalem Memorial Chapels. We are a brand new funeral home, just 2 years old. We have a location in Suffolk County, and we're building a location in Nassau County. But it doesn't matter what funeral home you used. I can help, and I have information to give, and I can guide you in how to navigate these waters with FEMA. I'm not going to make a long, drawn-out presentation. I'm sure everybody knows about it. I'm going to go over just some bullet points about the program itself. And then I want to just take some questions and try to help people who are on here and try to guide the people that are here. For those who don't know what the program is, I'm just going to go through a tiny bit of what it is. It is a in Joe Biden's package that they passed at the end of January, they appropriated right now, it's a blank check to FEMA to pay back people who paid for funerals for their loved ones because of COVID. So really, if your loved one, whether it be a family member or not, but if you paid for the funeral and the person died of or COVID was a factor in their death, and that's an important distinction, then you are eligible for up to $9,000 in reimbursement. And in a minute, we'll go through what that reimbursement means and what charges can be counted. But it's important to know that they didn't have to have died directly from COVID. If COVID-19 was on the death certificate as a contributing factor, and if you look at the death certificate, there should be upwards of 3 different factors in death, one a long-term factor and one a midterm factor and one the actual cause of death. So it doesn't, COVID-19 doesn't have to be the cause of death, but it does have to be on there. And I have had families who have had their loved one who had tested positive for COVID in the hospital, passed away. COVID was not put on the death certificate, and they were able to have the certificate amended. So if you had a loved one that
Wow.
had tested positive for COVID, but it wasn't put on the death certificate as a contributing factor, you can go back to the hospital or the doctor or the medical professional who did fill out the death certificate and ask them to amend it. Obviously, if they weren't tested, and then there wasn't proof that the person did have COVID, then unfortunately, there's nothing we can do. But if they were tested and if it's in the records that they were positive, then and it wasn't put on, then you can. But let's go through and tell me if you can't see me or hear me. But let's go through some of the let's go through the process first. I'd like to just go through the process. It is all done on the phone. So I don't know if anybody has tried yet, but everything is done on the phone with FEMA. There's no online application. What you do is you call the assistance hotline, and just like anything else with the government, you're gonna get a lot of busy signals and a lot of waiting time and a lot of frustration. And they acknowledge that, but they tell us, we were on a call with them just a week ago for an update, and they told us that they have trained all of the call center, all the people at the call centers in what they need to do, what is needed, and to be, as they put it, nice to people. So hopefully they are doing that. If you get an agent, they're going to open a case file and they're going to give you an account number. That account number is essentially the number that the application will live by. So anytime you call back, anytime you want to send in paperwork or send in anything and have any questions, that account number is going to be vital. You then ask to upload documents to their online database, or you could fax documents to FEMA. So if you, I assume everybody on here, because you got on the Zoom, that you're technically proficient enough to submit stuff through a web portal. But if you're not, then they do offer the ability to fax the documents. You must provide all of the documentation that is requested. I'm sure everybody knows how the government works. If you don't dot an I or cross a T, they're going to send it back to you and tell you it's not complete. So make sure you go through everything that's needed. And we're going to go through some of the things that are needed and what could trip people up in a second. It undergoes a series, what they tell me is it undergoes a series of validation and documentation checks. So don't be surprised if they come back to you with questions, or if they tell you it's incomplete, even if it is complete. They're going to have people that are going to go through it. And I'm not sure the government wants to give away their money so quickly, so they can stall. Their caseworkers look at the application, may reach out to you by phone or email. And then once it hits a certain level of confidence, they're going to grant financial assistance. And there is really no time frame as to when payment would be made. I have not had a family that I've spoken with that has gotten payment yet, but I have had families that have been approved for payment. So they are approving people. I just haven't had a family that has told me that they've received payment yet. That was a lot of talking by me. Any questions so far? Anybody have any questions with what I described for the process?
Someone put in the chat, can you repeat how to send the information?
Okay, so once you call the FEMA hotline, and they open up a case and give you an account number, they're also going to give you instructions on how to upload documents to their database. So they're going to ask you to upload those documents through a web portal. If you cannot do that, they will give you a fax number on where to fax that documentation. I hope that answers the question. You need an account number before you can send in the documentation. Now they'll go over that with you on the phone, and they will discuss the documentation with you. But to submit it, you'll either need to upload it or you need to fax it in.
Someone said, I spoke to someone after waiting on hold for 40 minutes and they didn't give me an account number. They said I'd get the papers in the mail and I didn't. I guess what should she do next?
Unfortunately, my advice would be to call back and try to get someone who's a little more astute to the system. You might have found someone that didn't know the process. The people that have been the most successful have had people on the phone that have given them the information, opened an account. Um, Now, if I could ask a follow-up question to the person who asked that, was there anything that they told you that you were deficient on, or a reason that they couldn't open give you an account number at the time? Was there something they asked for that you couldn't give?
Said no reason, no.
No reason. Okay.
Another question, this was a good question. We prepaid for my mom's funeral. And she did, one second, and she passed away from COVID. Can we still get reimbursed? That's a very good question, actually.
Unfortunately not. If you prepaid, if you had a prepayment, pre-plan, or for either Medicaid purposes or just because you wanted to be prepared, then that is not eligible. Funds put aside for the purposes of paying for a funeral are not able to be reimbursed. Now, if you used life insurance to pay it, that is able to be reimbursed.
Oh,
Really, the only thing that's not able to be reimbursed is pre-planned
Thank you.
payments. Also, it has to be the person who paid for the funeral that sends the application. They even drill down more. I had a person who passed away whose mother and sister were still alive. The sister paid for the funeral, but with a credit card under the sister's name, but that it was under the mother's account. So the mother had an additional card that she had gotten for her daughter in her name. The government, the FEMA at first said they weren't accepting the application, and then we had to change the funeral bill and some of the other documentation to read the mother's name and address, even though the sister handled everything and paid with a credit card that the card had the sister's name on it. The account was in the mother's name or under the mother's umbrella, and we had to amend that, and then it was accepted. Also, if you had multiple people pay for a funeral, let's say two siblings choose to chip in and pay half and half for a parent's funeral or another sibling's funeral, then you become co-applicants. You can't have two applications. It is one application, but you'll have co-applicants. So if any of the fees were split up, you'd have to have a co-applicant with the person who helped pay for that funeral.
Someone's asking, I guess, Joyce, what is reimbursable? I guess you want to know specifically what's
Okay.
reimbursable.
So specifically, what is reimbursable? It's a good question. Let me get to my handy list and we will go through that now. Okay, could everybody see me and hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what funeral expenses are covered? Transportation for up to two people to identify the deceased. So if you took an Uber or a cab or any kind of public transportation to identify the remains before the funeral, that is reimbursable. The transfer of the remains, so the transportation, so the funeral home going to pick the person up from where they passed, bring them back to the funeral home, that's reimbursable. The casket or an urn that was used, the cost of the casket, that's reimbursable. If you bought a burial plot, if you bought a plot for this purpose at the time, you can include that. If you had cemetery expenditures, so a lot of people, I'm going to go out on a limb and say most of our families that I'm talking to are of the Jewish religion. Obviously, you know there is an opening fee for the cemetery. So on the funeral bill, if you see the cemetery fee, that is a fee the cemetery charges to open and close the grave. That is reimbursable. If you paid for clergy, so if you paid an honorarium to a rabbi or a cantor or a priest, that's reimbursable. The funeral arrangement, so there's an arrangement fee on the funeral bill. That's probably next to the casket and the cemetery. That's probably the most expensive fee that's on the funeral bill. That is reimbursable. Use of any funeral home equipment or staff, any cremation or interment costs, like I said, anything, any cemetery costs associated with the death certificate. So in Nassau, Suffolk County, death certificates are $10 each. In the city of New York, they're $15 each. All of that is reimbursable. And any additional expenses that you had to incur for either the burial or the funeral itself. So any permit fees. New York City has a death permit fee of $90. Suffolk County has a cremation permit fee of $75. Some societies, burial societies, have permit fees for burial. Any of those are reimbursable. Yes. So I hope that answers the question. Were there any other specific charges that someone had incurred that I didn't mention that you had a question about? So in the chat, it said, what about the stone? As of right now, they have not said yes and they have not said no. But the limit is $9,000. So with all the expenses that were there and doing the addition in my head and knowing what funerals cost, we're getting close to 9,000 with all of those expenses. If you didn't hit $9,000, I would, before I applied, I would get an estimate for a stone and have that added to the funeral bill and see what they say and see if they would accept that. They have not said yes and they have not said no. So it's one of those things where if you didn't hit the $9,000, then you should include it on the bill and see if they will.
Is there a
Worst comes to
time
worst, you
frame?
paid for a stone a little earlier than you expected to.
Well, is there
Gloria.
a time frame on this? That's what I was wondering. Is there a time frame on the stone, or is there a time frame period over this? Is it from?
Right now, there's no time frame. There's rumors that the application will be open till 2025.
Oh, wow.
But the current administration is not going to be in there until 2025. So I wouldn't wait till a new administration. And I'm not getting political. I'm just saying, administrations change or policies change, and the world works very quickly. If a year from now it's not in the best interest to reimburse people, they might close it up. So I would act now while it's still fresh in everybody's head, while it's still part of the national conscience. I would act now. There's also no cap on the amount of money they're going to give out. So it's a blank check right now. That's not going to always be the case. There's definitely going to be accountants in the government that are going to see this money going out and try to cap it at something. So it's my advice to everyone to get all the information together and apply for it now. Let's go over what is needed. Let me just go to my little cheat sheet. We'll go over what is needed for so the information that you're going to need when you make the call is the name of the individual responsible, whoever actually paid the bill. In my example before of the sister who paid the bill in her name, but the account was in her mother's name, still holds true. So be careful of who actually paid, because they're going to ask that. But what the deceased name was, obviously, the total amount of the funeral expenses, and the date that the expenses, so the date of the funeral, the date that you paid. The documentation that's needed. So the social security number for the applicant and the deceased. So they're going to need, I'm assuming it's someone here that's applying. They're going to need your social security number and the social security number of the person who passed away. The date of birth of both the applicant and the deceased. So the person, your date of birth and the date of birth of the person that passed away. The current mailing address for the applicant, a telephone number where they could reach you, the location or address where the deceased passed away, information about burial or funeral insurance policies. In New York State, funeral insurance is illegal, so nobody should have any funeral insurance. Any insurance that might have been paid, any death benefit that is paid is not considered funeral insurance and is able to be reimbursed. So if you had an annuity with a death benefit, if you had a life insurance policy, if someone's job had a life insurance policy or a death benefit, that is still able to be reimbursed.
What about a pre-planned funeral expense?
So unfortunately, no, that is not covered. Any monies marked away in a pre-planned account or a pre-planned trust is not eligible for reimbursement.
Okay, so but anything related to the stone?
So I addressed that before And unfortunately, I don't have a concrete answer. They have not addressed that. They haven't given a definitive answer on that. They haven't rejected that yet, but they haven't paid out on it yet. So my advice is I would create the stone, give a deposit for the stone, have the stone.
Loan has already been paid for.
Then I would submit that bill saying that you might have had a pre-planned trust, but you did not expect to pay for the stone was unexpected and the timing was unexpected. That's what I would do with the stone. Information about any other insurance, funeral assistance received, such as donations. If you had people on a GoFundMe or any kind of public forum making donations to pay for the funeral directly to the funeral home, then you'd have to account for that. If you had someone just give you a check or anything like that, and it wasn't paid to the funeral home, then it's not applicable. But if you had a public fundraising event or a public fundraiser that paid directly to the funeral home, then that needs to be accounted for.
Can I ask a question? So
Yes.
about the stone, because I was told by the funeral home I have a contract for the stone, but obviously my husband just recently died, so I didn't pay for it yet. So can I submit that? Are they going to accept a contract to pay? Because like I'm not going to put a stone when the Jewish tradition doesn't even allow it for.
Well, the Jewish tradition is you wouldn't have a stone for the first 30 days, the mourning period.
Right.
After that, it's a mitzvah to mark a Jewish grave. A lot of people have the misnomer of the 1 year, that it should happen on the 1 year anniversary. That's really a product of our modern life. The stones take a certain amount of time to etch and to build. The cemetery is charged with pouring the concrete foundation. They don't pour foundations when the ground is frozen. So let's say from the end of November, beginning of December, all the way through March, they're not pouring foundations.
Okay, so if you submit the contract without proof that you paid,
I don't think if you didn't pay, I don't think they're gonna pay.
well, let
I
me
think
ask
you have
this.
to show proof of payment.
So if they give me a partial payment and then I submit more proof, would they give me an additional amount of money? Like, can you do a twice submission?
No, it's once.
Oh, shoot. Okay.
So my advice would be to pay. If you're gonna mark the grave anyway, you're gonna have a stone anyway. If we're going to assume that eventually there'll be a stone at the grave, my advice would be to pay in full for the stone and have the stone erected, and then submit the contract and the proof of payment to FEMA.
Before they give you the check.
Well, they're not gonna give you a check if you haven't incurred the cost.
Right, but I incurred the cost for the funeral, and then there's the 1,800 for the stone. So I gave the contract. So what you're telling me is if they pay out the 7,000, they're not going to pay me out the 1,800 if I later submit proof of payment?
Right. I would handle everything all at once.
Okay. All right.
Right. And I had said that before, and this is a great example. If I could just use you as the example, someone that I'm assuming your funeral did not total $9,000.
Right.
So I would then pay and submit for whatever got you to $9,000 in the stone. So if your funeral was $7,000, I would pay $2,000 to the stone and then submit it all as one reimbursement.
All right. I'm sorry for taking up. If they haven't paid me yet, I could go over to the funeral home, pay the $2,000, then submit the receipt online in addition with the contract. Like yes. I already.
I would tell them that you didn't realize that you didn't realize to put this in, and you have another proof of expenditure, and yes, I would resubmit it.
But how long do they take to pay? Like it's going to take 90 days. That's the whole point.
They don't know, and we don't know. Like I said, I've had people that have been approved for payment but haven't been paid yet. I've had families that I've helped that have gotten approved for payment, gotten through all the steps and approved, but have not been paid yet.
I just want to
Um,
tell everybody that there's one other glitch. I just want to get this out there about papers. Like if you submit a death certificate in New York City, they don't put COVID as the reason. So then you have to get the working copy of the death certificate and submit it to prove COVID. Like, how do you deal with that?
So you have to call, that's a great question. I'm glad you brought that up. That was in my notes for a little later.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're 100% right. In New York City, they do not put cause of death on a death certificate. And it is up to the funeral home to request a written statement of what the cause of death was. So it's an extra step the funeral home has to take when ordering the death certificates. You get a separate sheet of paper from the health department stating what the cause of death was.
Well, my funeral, Sherman, gave me the working copy of the death certificate. The working copy has the death certificate and the notes of the doctors saying it's COVID. Is that sufficient?
Right. They made it now. FEMA made a point of saying that they're not going to accept working copies, but that's with the cause of death on it. And I think they were referring to Nassau and Suffolk County. Because you had a certified copy that you submitted and then submitted the working copy for the cause, they might accept that or they might kick that back. If they kick that back to you, you just need the addendum. It's not a working copy, it's an addendum. It needs to be requested when the funeral home makes the request for the death certificates through the city of New York. Catherine, you're muted.
I already submitted that. It's a month and a half. In other words, I got the death certificate. FEMA notified me that the death certificate doesn't say COVID. So then I got the working copy, and my funeral guy swears that's sufficient in New York City because the working copy does have the reason of death.
I would wait and see if they accept it or not. They said they're not taking working copies. I took that to mean in Nassau and Suffolk County, because in Nassau and Suffolk County, a working copy does not have the registrar's seal on it nor signature. So it's not a filed copy.
Right. But in New York City, the filed copy of the death certificate does not have the cause of death. So the working copy, in addition to the real sealed copy, is what we have. Like, what else can I get?
There's an addendum that is ordered with the death certificate that states the cause of death. Many people need that when they're applying for any kind of life insurance or death benefit. If you have a loved one that passes away and you are submitting a claim for life insurance, most of the time they'll need a cause of death. And in New York City, that's why they created these addendums. It's just a white piece of paper that goes along with the certified copy that has the stated cause of death and the certifier's name and signature. Any other questions or concerns before I move on?
I tried submitting it, but I have not gotten anything that came in a form of an acknowledgement that I have made this thing. When I called them again, they told me that they mailed it out to me, that it was scheduled to go out April 14th, but I still have not gotten it. Is that normal for what they're doing? I mean, I was like panicking that I called the wrong number, like it was a fraudulent thing.
At first, they were as you can imagine, they were inundated with requests from all over. So it did take a long time for them to get caught up. And like anything else, like anything else the government does, they weren't prepared. So, it would seem silly for them to think that they wouldn't be inundated, but they weren't prepared for the influx and the call volume that they got. So I think if you wanted to give it a little more time before it got there, I would, but if not, I would call again, see if you get someone nice on the phone that can maybe check into it for you.
They said that it's being processed, but I haven't gotten anything, not even an email to say that they received it. So,
and that's not uncommon. I've had families that have gotten a lot of feedback, and I've had families that have gotten no feedback until they were approved. So there's no one fail safe, and there's no one.
okay, thank you.
No, you're welcome. Any other questions? All right. So I just wanted to go over the documentation needed. I'm not sure if we did that yet. But from their letter of their law, so what they say is that the death, like I said, you need a death certificate that may have been caused by or was likely the result of or had COVID-19 like symptoms, similar phrases to that on the death certificate. The death must have occurred, obviously, in the United States. Documentation for expenses, any receipts of the funeral home contract, the paid bill, and it must include both the applicant's name as the person responsible for the expenses and the deceased individual's name, the amount of funeral expenses, and that the funeral expenses were incurred after January 20th of 2020. You must provide FEMA with proof of funds received from any of the sources specifically for funeral costs. So like I said, if there was any fundraisers, any GoFundMe's or anything like that. COVID-19 funeral assistance is not used as a duplicate for benefits received. So if you received assistance from any, like I said, voluntary agencies or government programs or agencies or things like that, then it'll be reduced. And like I said, life insurance proceeds are not considered a duplication. So if there was life insurance, and you use that, then you do not, that is not you could still be paid for this. Unfortunately, if you were afflicted with multiple deaths within the family and you were charged or left to pay the charges, it's up to $35,000 per applicant. So it's $9,000 per funeral or up to $35,000 per applicant if you had multiple. Is there any other questions, comments, concerns, anything?
Yeah, hello.
Hi.
Hi, Andy Ackerman. My mother passed away in a nursing home,
I'm sorry.
and this is a year ago now. And they had been treating her for COVID symptoms, and we understood that, even though they didn't tell us directly, but that her floor was designated more like the COVID floor. And they weren't very transparent about anything. So at the time she passed away, or just before she passed away, they told us that they were treating her as if she had COVID, and that they asked if I wanted her tested, but it wouldn't make a difference. So I said, no, don't test her, simply because she had dementia, and that would be too invasive for her to handle, and it wouldn't make a difference. So they really kind of dissuaded us from that. So when she passed away, they didn't put COVID symptoms on the death certificate. They put they put heart failure. We requested the medical records, and we see that they were truthful in the records, and the COVID symptoms and the treatment and so on is documented.
And it says presumed COVID.
And it said presumed COVID. I went back to them prior to getting the medical records and asked if they would change it, and the doctor who signed it said he absolutely wouldn't. And clearly, for some reason, they don't want to disclose the amount of COVID deaths that they had. But now that I see the medical records and see that it's well documented, I want to go back to them again. If they don't put it on one of the lines, then I've got no position with this application.
Unfortunately. And my advice on that end would be to consult an attorney and see if they can make the call for you, because to the nursing home, and see if they'll amend it, because they just revoked the immunity that the nursing homes have for COVID deaths and their negligence. So I think they're all going to be cognizant of people just like yourself, asking questions and raising suspicions and seeing why certain things were done certain ways. And if mom was on the COVID floor and that was acknowledged, then there might be some culpability.
Yeah, well, they didn't.
So my advice would be, I would think that they would want to help you, help you try to be reimbursed this way than be reimbursed through them.
Yeah, so what I would like to get is now, unfortunately, I'm a little more familiar with death certificates. I'd like them to get on one of the lines, the extra lines, them to put the presumed COVID in there, and I think that would do it. And from what I understand, in New York State, you can't get just any doctor to amend the death certificate. It has to be the guy that signed it, right?
Right.
So that's what I'm dealing with. But what you're saying is, if they can help me get these economics instead of going for some other way, they might be more cooperative.
Yeah, and I think maybe if you had a friend or a colleague or someone that was an attorney that would make the call, I think someone that was uninvolved in a separate party, I think that might
Yeah. My friend Jerry will do it.
we all, I think everybody on the call has a friend that's an attorney, right?
Right. Well, all right. Anyway, thank you. I appreciate the
You're welcome.
direction there.
They revoked the immunity for hospitals too?
I don't know about hospitals. I don't know. That's a question for an attorney. I know for nursing homes and nursing facilities, but I don't know about hospitals itself. That's a question for an attorney.
Adam, someone asked if you could tell the phone number again to call.
Oh, sure. Let me get that.
Somebody doesn't have it.
So it is 844-684-6333, and I'll put it in the chat as well, so you have it.
Thank you.
There seems to be two tiers of people who answer questions there, because I've called a lot. I am an attorney, actually, but so there's the customer support, but then they have people who supposedly call you who are a higher tier. They're the ones who are making decisions about what is missed, but you never know if they're going to call you, and the number that comes in could be from anywhere. Like, how do you trace the people who are actually doing your cases, who may call you and then, you're not answering the phone because they're not there. And then when you call that number back, it's a non-existent number. Like, how do you deal with that?
From what I'm told, you never get the same person. There's, like you said, there's people who intake the information and are more customer service driven. And then there's people who will review it and make the decisions and then reach out to people. But from what we're told, because someone had asked that question during the briefing that we were given, that you never get the same person twice. There's no extensions or anything like that. I think that's what's leading to really most of the frustration with people, is they can't get solid answers and they can't get the same person again. So you have to regurgitate all of the information or all the questions that you're given. So I apologize, I don't have a better answer for that, but those are the answers we were given. Any other questions from anyone?
Anybody else? Catherine, you're muted again.
How do they communicate with you? Like, there's this whole thing that if you do it online, they tell you online, but if you tell them by mail, they're supposed to mail. And like, what are we supposed to do? Check online every day to see if there's a decision? Like,
they've reached out. They reach out to you by email or by mail when a decision is made. So I don't think you have to keep checking the online portal or anything like that. But just be ready for an email or a call. And unfortunately, in these days, when you get a weird number on your phone, nobody wants to answer it. But it probably behooves everyone, if you're in the application process, to just answer the calls, because you don't know when it's going to be someone who needs some additional information. And I know I wasn't the funeral home used, but if anybody has any questions offline, my face and my phone number hanging on both the Mid-Island Y wall and the Friedberg JCC wall. But Gloria has my contact information,
I do.
And I'm sure she'd be glad to share it with anyone if you had any questions or concerns, or you need any additional help offline, or if someone you didn't want to share any of your personal situation through the Zoom, but you had a question that you'd like to share in private or ask in private. I'm always available for anyone. I think
Can I
Ronnie has a
just
question.
I wanted to add one thing, and that's having worked with FEMA over the last 11 years for different things. They're very slow. They work at glacial speed and they're understaffed. And it could, I don't want to be the bearer of, bad news, but you need to give it a minimum of 60 days. And then my suggestion would be, if you don't hear from them and you feel that you've really done everything that you need to do, I would call your local legislator. I would call for, those that live in our catchment area, call Todd Kaminsky's office. Speak to them. He's incredibly receptive and responsive, and he's got a team of people that help. But I will say that, before 60 days, it's been a terrible year and you've been through a lot of trauma, and, you don't need to, and FEMA is a trauma in and of itself, but give it the 60 days and then call Todd. Because I know his office has been incredibly helpful to us and to a lot of his constituents.
Thank you, Ronnie.
I'll echo Ronnie's statement about Todd. I went to high school with him. We played tennis together on the Long Beach High School tennis team. We were in Hebrew school together. I call him Hurricane Todd, but he definitely has a lot of energy, and he's definitely responsive. He's definitely on his constituent sides. So
he is, and they follow, and his team follows up, and they will follow up with you. So.
At the beginning, when people could get vaccines, he got half the people I sent to him vaccines. Nobody could get it through on a telephone, and he really did that for me. So I know that,
unemployment too.
Yeah,
People that couldn't get unemployment, they walked them up the line.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, he just did it, and I knew when I sent it that it was going to happen. I had no doubt in my mind that he was going to take the call and was going to take care of it. So I know it's true. Yeah, thank you. Any other questions? This is your chance.
Well, I know it's, and like Ronnie said, everybody on here has been afflicted by this, and it's probably still raw, and emotions are always high with something like this. I know, because I deal with it on a daily basis. I don't pretend to understand everybody's situation, but I do know that it's tough to come on and speak about it. And I thank you all for coming on and listening to me, and for those who shared and asked questions. And thank you for giving just a few minutes towards trying to understand what this program is about. And like I said, I'm here for anybody at either JCC, anybody on here. If you have any questions or concerns, email, a text, or a call. I'm here 24 hours.
Can you put your email somewhere again? I don't see it.
Sure. I'm going to type my contact information into the chat.
And if for whatever reason you can't get through on that, or you have difficulty getting that, just, people have my email for sure, or my number, just call me and I will send it over to you without a problem. And also, just so you're aware, we're recording this, everyone. So, if there's some information you may have missed along the way, it should be will be put onto our website, and you will be able to listen to it again at any point that you need to. So that should be helpful, I hope.
And even if you didn't want to hear my voice or hear what I have to say or what I write, I did write a piece on it on my website. I'm going to put the website in the chat as well, but I wrote pretty much everything that we discussed here in a blog post on my website, just to give everybody information. So if you just wanted to read a concise, bullet pointed, half a page about it, it's very concise. It's not, it doesn't drone on like I do. You can go on my website and
maybe
see
we could
there.
link it to ours. In other words, maybe we can
Sure.
put the link on ours. I think that would be really useful, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
So I will, Stacy, if you could, maybe let Karen know, let's link it. I think that'd be a great thing to have, so people can access it through our agency as well. All right, everybody.
Adam has to go to a board meeting, I think.
From the sublime to the ridiculous is that what's that? We're going to say it that way. Thank you so much, Adam, for all the
Thank you.
information. Also, I would just want to wish for all of you, I know what a hard year this is, you know, my sympathies to all of you, to all of us. It's definitely a trauma that everyone's dealing with, and we don't want FEMA to make it more traumatic. So let's try to get what's our due, and certainly use Adam's suggestions, and he's there as a really good resource. So let's take advantage of that. So thank you all for coming on tonight. And I wish you all well. All right, everyone.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a good night.
Everyone
too.
have a good night.